Welcome to the Financial and Future Tech Podcast. This gets to air every Thursday, 8 p.m. East African time. That is 8 p.m. East African time on eJazz Radio. But you can also get the entire episodes of all the shows that we get to feature on this podcast on any podcast app of choice. All you have to do is search for Finance and Future Tech, and you'll be able to access the entire episodes that we've featured on the show. But catching the show live, that's Thursdays, 8 p.m. East African time. So make sure you make a date with us then, 8 p.m. East African time. My name is Mark, and today I'm joined by an amazing lady that has done well for herself in terms of, finding her footing within the tech space. And she has worked with a couple of companies, and we shall be getting into all that. But Mercy Angela is on the podcast. Mercy, how are you doing? And glad we're able to do this.
Hi, Mark. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to get started on this new endeavor. Thank you for the intro. I don't know that I've done that much, but hopefully I will do that much soon.
But let's see, if you all go back in, where was your first interest even in joining the world of tech?
It's a long story, but to be honest, I wanted to be a lawyer when I was younger, but then even all the way back then, I was really interested in computers, but not because of computers for computers' sake. I wanted to type my novels. So my friend and I, we used to go to my mom's workplace weekend because that's where the computers were, and would type out the novels we had been writing the entire week. So I got really good with computers. So when I realized history wasn't for me and I needed that back then to go into law school, I was like, okay, for now, let me do, physics and computer stuff, and then we shall get to the law part later. The rest is history. I fell in love with computers. I fell in love with software. I fell in love with the entire thing. And, the way tech is not just an end, but a means to an end. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what I think a lot of times we tend to miss out. We are knowing that tech just aids us do things that we already want to do, or we are already equipped to do. So it's enabler for some of the things we want to be done or even accomplish.
I agree.
Yeah. So you want to read novels, you want to do law, then you end up doing technology. How is that transition? Because there are two different worlds. Yes. Which
it wasn't so hard, in my opinion. I mean, I think if you look around, technology products are now ubiquitous in our world. Whatever you're doing, you're probably, doing something with tech, your phones, the computers we're typing on. So even lawyers are now heavily reliant on tech. And then if you get into things like data and privacy law, then you really have to understand some of the inner workings of things like cybersecurity and protection of people's rights online. But for me, I think it was kind of this transition where I like this thing, I want to know more about it, and then it's actually not that hard to know about it. The good thing with tech is a lot of information is out there online, and the industry is not opposed to you self-teaching and learning. So for me, it was just like, let me go learn more about this. And then I became the unofficial person people go to at home when they're like, oh, I want to fix this. Can you help me understand this? I think because most people were just not that interested. They were like, nah, this thing, it doesn't really make it work. Like, it was complicated at that point. So people didn't want to learn more. And then for me, I was like, okay, this is just something else I want to learn. I want to know how to use the computers and this and that and that. So yeah, that's how I went. I don't think it was that hard of a transition, but maybe because I already liked math and physics. So for me, it was logical what computers were doing. Yeah.
Okay. And so when we go fast forward from the time you decide this is going to be what your life will be about, and trying to get involved with emerging technologies and even creating solutions for some of the problems that you get to see, or even with some of the companies you worked with. So in terms of work, I think I got to know you when you were working with Easy Greek, but is there a backstory from where you were before then?
A long backstory. So for me to actually decide I was going to work in tech in some way or the other, I was like I think S2, S3, when I realized I don't know that I'm going to be reading, these history books for that much longer. It was just so boring. So I started doing research on what I could do because I also didn't really like biology like that. Like I understood it, but I also didn't want to be reading about it like that. So then I realized, okay, I could do physics, I could do math, I could do, things like that. And then I was like, with this, I could actually, go do software engineering in a university or computer engineering. So then that became my focus. So then I had to go back to convince my family that I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. And I don't want to be a doctor either. I want to do something with computers. And they didn't understand computers. And then I was trying to explain to them that trajectory of where, computers and tech will be in the next 10, 15 years. It was an uphill battle, but luckily they really support me with my endeavors as long as I can prove the point. So I proved the point. I'm like, listen, the data outside of Uganda is saying that, working in tech and tech jobs are growing exponentially. And in the next 10, 15 years, I'll likely have a good job. So that's how I got into, really wanting to focus on tech. So I went into university, which was New York University. I went to the Shanghai campus. So I moved to China, and in China, it's crazy. The advances there are out of this world in terms of how far they've gone. And I lived 7 years in China for university and then started working there. So I had a job there. And of course, I was working in tech, and it was kind of like finding tech solutions for the company that I was working in to either solve the problems they had in-house or really to help them build even more business using the data that we're collecting with our customers. So I only moved back to Uganda in 2020 because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I moved back here, had come to see the family, of course. And then I was like, okay, you know what? Let me stay for a bit as this thing gets sorted out. So that's how I moved back. And during that time, I decided I wanted to work in, the Ugandan tech scene. I was already very heavily involved, I think, for my peers, because each time I'd be over, I'd be going to tech events. I'd done internships with tech companies in Uganda. So shout out to my first bosses, Cola Studio, because they're still my friends. But I loved working with them, and I still love, working with them even now, because we're next door neighbors at my workplace. And they're really great guys. But they gave me a good footing with the tech industry in Uganda. So I used to go for most tech events that were happening when I was around. I used to reach out to people. So me moving back and wanting to work in the tech scene in Uganda, I think wasn't very jarring because I had contacts in the industry. So Easy Agric puts out this ad for a product manager, which was not also it's not a very popular role in Uganda, but I think even in just the last 2 years, there's been way more product managers than I found in 2020. So I think companies are starting to realize why this is important, right? So they put out this ad for a product manager. It was on LinkedIn. And it was easy apply. I don't know if you know how hard easy apply. It's not serious, easy apply. So I just easy applied. I was like, you know what, whatever. What happens, happens. I easy applied, and I actually got called for the interview. And then I met really great people there. So that's how it started, really, me working seriously in tech in Uganda. And it has evolved since then. So I've tried to continue being involved in the industry, which is, I think, what is important, to have your finger on the pulse and know people and what they're doing and support them. So, yeah.
So one would ask, if they are listening, they would ask, why would you be in a much more advanced country with a much more advanced technology in terms of how fast it has gone and how quickly they keep adapting to things? Why would you rather then leave that out and then come into Uganda, which we are like on a trajectory of, we are growing, there is growth. Like you said, when you applied for a product manager position, then that position has, it wasn't a very popular position, but now, there's been some, increase in that area and people are getting into that. But the decision to decide and get into an emerging market rather than getting into a space where you're already at in an advanced role, because that's what people here work to do, to get into a much more advanced market.
Okay. For me, I'd learned my things, and I can't say that I would never, go back to working in an advanced market. But I think there's something really exciting about new things happening somewhere. Like, you have I was working, Easy Greek is a startup. I was working at a startup, and startups are very fast paced, and things change today, tomorrow, in the next hour, things are going to change. And I think there's something really cool and really, I don't want to use, I don't say very exciting, but the word is very exciting. But it's also very invigorating, like working in an emerging market and knowing that the interventions you're doing are almost like pioneering. Like, we think of things and then we try them out because nobody has tried them out before, and it might work, it might not work. But for me, I find that also kind of exciting. So there is a difference between, the startup world and like established organization world, but also emerging markets and mature markets. So in China, for example, with tech, it's a given, that of course there's a solution that solves that. What are you talking about? So it's almost kind of just about maintenance. But here, when you're working in an emerging market and everybody's just trying out things for the first time, you're convincing customers to give you a chance. There's something like really interesting about that for me. So I figured, let me pursue that and see how that goes. So that's why I decided to do it. I'm also I overthink things, but then I'm also very, it doesn't hurt to try. So
Yeah.
it's a mix of both worlds. So I overthink, I'll be like, should I do it? And then I'm like, why can't you do it? So then I try to do it and see how that goes. So the lessons have been plenty for sure.
Yeah. So you talked about the role of the product manager. So what would you describe as what that role would be if you are to give an overview of what that position does within the company?
Yeah. Depends on the industry, what we call in tech, they're called users. But I think in regular industry, sometimes they're called customers, especially where you're selling things to people. These are customers. In the NGO world that I work in, we call them beneficiaries or sometimes, users. But to be a product manager is to be the voice of that person. That person being whoever it is that is going to use, if it's a technology product, your technology product. But they're also product managers, for any kind of thing. They're there in the pharmaceutical world, I even actually recently found a product manager in the tourism world. So their job is to design tourism products for maybe resorts or like tour companies. It's really interesting. I was actually very deeply into it. But yeah, a product manager, you're the voice of the customer within the organization. So your job is to constantly find out and satisfy them in a way that is, there's this thing in tech that is called serendipity. When your customer knows what they want, but then you go above and beyond. I think it was kind of like a pioneering thing with Spotify, where they were like the playlists, right? Everyone raves about the Spotify playlist and how the algorithm really gets to understand you and the music it should recommend. So it's a thing that we're always chasing as product managers, that we give you the product you want and then go even an extra mile and like fascinate you and amaze you and have you so shocked that these guys could get your needs before you even thought about them. But that's what a product manager is. Yeah.
So you talked about satisfying the users, or what in the regular business they would call the customers. Then how do you prioritize the features and enhancements when let's say you're working on a new product now? For instance, if you are working on a product to solve a certain solution that the company you're working with, for example, Easy Grip was more into agriculture and trying to find solutions within there. So how do you prioritize the features and enhancements when you're developing a product for that sector, for example?
I think we start. There are a number of criteria, and there are also they're as if models, but guides on how do there are frameworks, actually, that's the word, on what ways you can prioritize. But off the top of my head right now, I would say major things is going to be resources available. So how much time do you have to make a change? How many, let's say, engineers, or even it could be cloud server space. Can your solution fit in the space? You have those things, but what resources do you have to build this thing? Another thing that we really focus on is impact. So I'm more of a customer first product manager, but sometimes you also have to worry about, I'm going to go down that road, but impact means it could be something that only 2-3 people have asked for, but if you can prove that when you do this thing, it's going to have like a huge impact. Like, for example, it will move the company's revenue from, like, let's say 10,000 let's say dollars, $10,000 to 100,000 in like 3 months. That's huge impact, even if only 2, 3 people have asked for it. But then also we look at what kind of demand is there within our, market, like our target group of customers. Have we gotten this request time and time again? And so if the resources are not that hard to fulfill it, and it moves the needle somewhere, and people have really asked for it as something that would improve the experience with your product, you do it quickly enough. So for me, it would be the resources available, the impact, the demand, and then lastly, because in the business world, it's about the business and the strategy. Is your plan aligning with the organization strategy? You can't just do things that the customers want if they don't align with the organization strategy. But the thing is, of course, the ideal is the organization strategy goes towards what the customers want. But you always have to see if the organization is looking to grow revenue this year, then a lot of your priority is going to be on features that grow revenue. It can't just be things that are cost centers, always taking money out of the company, and you're promising that in 10 years you shall make money.
Yeah.
Yet the plan is to make money this year. Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I think those would be the four most important things that a product manager has to look at.
Yeah, and with that position comes with you working with cross-functional teams, of course. So so what are some of the challenges that you get to encounter in that? Because at the same as you're developing a product for the users, in this case, you also have to deal with the people that are working on that solution with you to achieve that goal. Yeah. And so you have to get the people that are creating the solutions working, and then the users being able to experience the service that the people that are designing the solutions with you have been able to work on. So what are some of the challenges that you get to face when you're working with cross-functional teams, and some of the ways that in which people that are in this position or that are applying for this position need to understand and overcome?
Yeah. And interestingly enough, it's not even just, let's say the developers of the product, of the solution, or the users. There's going to be at some point the lawyers. This thing you're putting out, does it fulfill all legal requirements for the industry we're working in? Like yesterday, I was on a phone call with the finance team at my organization, being like, when we do this, does it still fit within your processes? That, when we get audited, it's still fine that we did this process versus the old method you were using. So there's a lot of teams involved that you have to consult, and you have to get them on the same page with you, because they are all very much key stakeholders for whatever it is they're working on. The best advice I can give anybody that I currently give people is learn to speak their language. You're working with software developers, attempt to speak their language, know what makes sense to them, so that you speak to them like that, and it's quick, like the communication is quick, you all understand each other, you move on to the next thing. Even if it's a non-technology product, if you're working with product formulators, let's say in the cosmetics business, or you're working with, car manufacturers and you're developing a new type of car, learn to speak the language of the particular team you're talking to. Finance cares about numbers, they care about accountability. So make sure those things are easily visible in your process. When you go to talk to marketing, they are caring about, how do we get this in front of the users' faces? So how do you also make your product something that maybe can even self-market and go viral on its own? But in the end, for you to avoid confusing yourself and then also confusing other people, or even coming off as I don't want to say not inauthentic, but like not hearing, because people be like, you don't hear what I'm saying, right? Yeah. For you to not come off as that, learn how to speak in the terms of the different teams they're talking to. Your job is to be able to ping different, locations and get a response. So it's not about them understanding, it's about you understanding them. That would be my primary advice to anyone getting into product management.
So when you learn the language of speaking to software developers, then of course, even the customer, when you are trying to introduce them to a new product, or the finance people who are providing the funds to make sure that is accomplished, how do you balance the needs then?
Oh, the thing is, the good thing about language and being persuasive is when you present your agenda in a nice way, people are going to buy into your agenda and then think they thought of that agenda. So yes, the key is to get them thinking like you and agreeing to your ideas. Okay, if they make sense. Also be open to guidance and all that kind of thing. But the point of being able to speak someone's language is they're more likely to buy into what you're selling them, right? Yeah. So it's not really because they're going to push back and say, no, you have to do it like that and you have to do it like that. Remember, the customer is the key person, not the stakeholders, the customer. So now you have to find a way to convince the different stakeholders that based on what the customer needs, and don't push your own agendas, push the customer's agendas, but based on what the customer needs, how can we as a team serve them? This is what the customer needs. What should we do? So I'm not really going in there and telling developers, you have to develop like this. I'm saying, this is our end product. How do we get to it? I'm going to the marketing team and saying, the customers want this. How do we then now make them know that this is what we have to offer? We have actually developed it for them. So yeah, it's speaking in a way that you're persuasive enough to get them on your side, but then also giving them the leeway to contribute to the ideas, because that brings ownership. If everybody knows that they have a piece of themselves in something, they are more likely to embrace it and also be its champion, either within the organization or outside of the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, and at the moment, you are still holding the same position of product manager, but at a different organization.
Yep.
Yeah, so talk to us about that and what the organization does.
Okay, so I'm currently at a nonprofit called Village Enterprise, and it's an NGO operating within East Africa in the poverty graduation space. Hopefully, we shall be growing to more parts of Africa, but currently we're working in East Africa, in Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and Ethiopia. And my job as a product manager there is to search for digital solutions that could have a great impact on our programming. So for us, impact means how can we reach more people and give them access to the services that Village Enterprise offers. Village Enterprise helps individuals that are living in extreme poverty to graduate from that into living a life over the poverty line. So for us right now, that's $2.15 of consumption a day. So we help them start a business, an enterprise within their villages where they can earn money that they can then save and grow the household assets they have, so they can increase their consumption, but then also be able to do things they would not have done prior, like, take their kids to school, buy a cow so that they have better nutrition in their households, things like that. So in my job as a product manager, a digital product manager, really, I'm looking and constantly scoping for solutions that help our entrepreneurs, so this is like, for example, we have savings groups. How do I get those savings groups digital? We are training right now in person all our entrepreneurs. That's not very scalable unless we're going to grow staff in crazy numbers, which means we're increasing operational costs instead of taking the money back to the entrepreneur. So then I look for a solution that can help us deliver our training and programming in digital methods that are still, easily teachable to people who are living below the poverty line, because that's actually who my target customer is. So I can't bring them complex technology when they've never even seen a smartphone before. Yeah. So my job is to look for solutions like that, work with companies that provide those solutions to make it work for Village Enterprise and the work we're doing, and then roll it out into the field, really. Yeah.
So that when you work with already existing solutions, that means a lot of partnerships have to come into play. And
yep.
How is that going? And what are some of the challenges that you're facing in trying to create those partnerships?
Yeah. Hectic some days, really great some days, because the partners that we end up working, they have really impactful solutions, and we're kind of just like another vehicle to get those solutions into the hands of their customers, right? So the things I've learned is the process is slow, of course, because partnerships take some time for everybody to gel and get on the same footing. But in the end, it means that the solutions I'm providing our entrepreneurs with these external partners are things that are sustainable. Sometimes when you build in-house, especially as a nonprofit, it means that the technology works well that people are in the program. But if you work with other partners, let's say commercial companies that already would have been working with this kind of customer, now you introduce to them as the organization this solution, but they can continue using it even after you exit their lives. So for me, I think that's on a scale of impact, it's that much more impactful because I introduce a digital solution to you that helps you and your group save money. And even when I'm away from your life and I've moved on to another community of people, you guys can still use this solution because this company still exists, it's still maintaining its product, and you're still their core customer, not me that was the linkage between them. So that's what I like about this partnership. Another comment I guess I could have is I have the benefit of having worked on the commercial side with Easier Greek, being a partner for organizations such as mine. And now, because I understand how to speak to those customers, I think it's that much easier as well. Like, okay, not the customers, the partner, right? Because I know what commercial companies are looking for. They're looking for reach. They're looking for profitability with their solutions. They're looking for numbers that make sense. So now even when I go in as an NGO, I'm pitching to them like that. Like, yes, we're an NGO. Of course, we're giving people free money, but also these are users that you could potentially have that you would acquire quite easily with us versus when you'd go out into the field to look for them yourself. So, yeah.
So that's the part of partnerships. Now, when you look at what you're trying to provide to the people that are the users that are on the other side, there are challenges. First of all, addressing the poverty gap, and also creating solutions that can help them move from that level to where they're able to sustain their family rather than living on $2 a day. What are some of the challenges you're facing in terms of because it takes a while. It's not like a 1 month solution. You literally have to go on training for more close to a year and more in order to realize the impact of what you've done.
Yeah.
So what are some of the challenges you're facing in implementing that to be able to move each homestead from below the poverty line to get to be able to be sustainable on their own?
Yeah. So I'll talk more on the challenges, at least with the tech side. I don't want to butcher or misreport the challenges that, even actual implementation has in terms of programming and that sort. But for sure, with the tech side, one of the hugest challenges we have is really institutional in terms of infrastructure. Usually the people that are living below the poverty line are in areas that don't have, access to, let's say things like cell towers, access to electricity. Let's go to the fact that if I tell them to access this digital solution that is online, they need data and that stuff. If they can't even get a cell signal, how are they going to get, to the buying mobile data part? So there's a lot of institutional work that needs to be done there in terms of getting these people connected to grids, electricity grids, mobile network grids, and stuff of the sort. So for me, I feel like a lot of work has to be done there, especially in our region, because I believe internet and technology is, like a highway to great things. So definitely, I want that to happen much faster than it's happening right now. Another thing, of course, now with our entrepreneurs is literacy.
Yeah.
Literacy in terms of basic literacy, but then also when you push it a bit further to digital literacy. So we have to do a lot of work as Village Enterprise, the organization in a space, but then also generally as organizations in the space to get people in our communities closer to digital literacy. This involves things even as simple as, do they have access to affordable phones, feature phones or smartphones? And when they do get that access, do they have places they can go and learn, how to use these devices, how to use them to improve their lives as well? So literacy is a big thing for us in the organization and something that we're constantly pushing. Interestingly enough, even with Easier Greek, we had to push literacy because to use tech solutions, someone has to be at a certain level of literacy. So it's something that's very important for anybody building tech solutions in East Africa, but even in Africa in general, to always look at the literacy of the people that you're working with and how do you push that envelope further. Yeah. So those are two of the most important things we're constantly looking at.
Yeah. And I think people also, as we are trying to create solutions, we should remember that a lot of things work in unison. So if it's better digital infrastructure, whether it's now having internet access in those areas, good network in those areas, network provided by the cell towers they put in those areas. Because even when you empower them, and let's say they're investing in agriculture, they still need roads to transport the goods they produce to the market.
Yeah.
So, and then they need better policies in terms of how, what is the support that is being rendered to them? Is government providing better, let's say if they're into agriculture, better seedlings for them to, have better produce, and the value addition on what they produce, how are they going to achieve that? So, with all that, I think has to be working in unison, because a lot of times people that create solutions tend to focus on, if we improve the digital access to some of what we are providing, then it solves the problem that we are trying to eliminate. But unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
There's even actually the gender lens to look at.
Yeah.
You could say, okay, we're working with people living in extreme poverty, or we're working with farmers in their communities. We're giving them access to these digital solutions. And then you automatically think that this means that anybody has access to these things, like the solutions you're providing. But it's not the case. You find a community where, if a woman owns a phone, it's a problem for the household, right? If she has access to, phone calls and messaging that has not been approved by, let's say, the men in the household, it's a problem. So we always also have to look at it with a gender lens. How do we communicate this properly that, everybody in the household knows that this is something that is pushing the entire household forward, and is not, maybe making the women become rebellious, as some people say, and things of the sort. So it's also something seriously that has to be looked at, the cultural and social norms and expectations, and then how to also teach change or revolution along those lines. So we also look at it very heavily. We part of our programming is gender focused in terms of, being able to let the communities know that anybody should and can have access to these solutions. Not only men can use them, and not only for women either, but if you're interested, you should be able to have access, and it should not be a problem in your society that you get access to these solutions. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's what will be discussed, guys, on finance and future tech. How can people follow you, though, Mercy, and to connect with you?
On most social medias, I'm Miss Nantongo. So MISS, then Nantongo, my name. So you can find me anywhere there. Reach out, text, DM. I'll be happy to respond.
Okay. Do the DMs have to be specific? Until next time, guys.
That would be like FFT.
Until next time, the Finance and Future Tech podcast, available where you get podcasts from. My name is Mark. I was with Mercy Angela, and we shall be back next time. As for now, we have nothing left for you.